Hello and welcome to episode 21 of season 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
And I'm Mark Bishop, and this podcast season is now legal to drink.
That is true. We can't believe we've been doing it for over 20 episodes now. But we are, of course, reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, a book detailing myths from around the world. We are, of course, talking about Indian mythology, and this time we are moving away from Hinduism, and we are going to talk about some legends of Buddha. Just a brief overview. What do you think of this chapter as a whole? We're gonna do this the brief sort of opinions at the beginning here.
Well, I guess I'm interested in the philosophy or the religion of Buddha, but that's not what this topic really is. You know, this is a mythology summary, and so there's interesting tales of Buddha and the reincarnated Buddha and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, and there's some taste of flavor of the philosophy or religion, but I do want to study that at some point. But that's my thought. I thought it was interesting stories about the philosophy and how it kind of came about of self-denial and the denial of temptations, or however you want to put it, in order to get peace or inner peace, or to go to nirvana and that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say pretty much the same thing. We do definitely get a little taste.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, sure you were. You have me answer, and then did you even read this?
Of course I read this.
Okay.
But yeah, I was going to kind of say the same thing. We definitely do get a taste of like some of the philosophy and some of like the actual religion behind it, what goes into Buddhism. And that was very, very interesting to me. I'll talk about that more in detail, just in kind of like ties to other, moral principles that we've already seen. But yeah, it was definitely these are just short little snippets of the more mythological aspects of Buddhism, not necessarily an overview of Buddhism as a practice.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Take it away.
Yes, and that segues right into our first story, which is the life of Buddha. In the 5th century BC, Prince Gautama was born to Raja Sudona and Queen Maya, after she saw in a dream a white elephant lowering from heaven, and the moon itself fell into her lap, and when Buddha was born, he was thrust from her side. The prince was beloved, and when he learned to walk, he took 7 steps in each of the cardinal directions, signaling his spiritual conquest of the earth. He became an expert in many skills and arts, and married the girl Yasodhara at age 16, and they soon had a son named Rahula, and Gautama lived in complete luxury. Gautama often went out with his charioteer Channa, and on 3 trips they saw 3 men, one so old that he had difficulty moving, one very poor and ill lying in the gutter, and one who had recently died. And upon seeing...
Wait, hold on. I thought it was the same dude.
I think it was 3 different people. It could be the same dude. Did I misread that?
I think you did.
I believe it is 3 different people.
Oh, I always thought it was the same dude, and I'm like, why didn't he stop the chariot and help the dude out?
Yeah, I think it's 3 different people. But that would be interesting if it was the same person. He saw the same person at 3 different stages of his life. But I think it is 3 different people. But each time that they saw each of these men, Channa wisely proclaimed that this shall be the fate of all people. After this, Gautama found no joy in his material pleasures, and he decided to live in meditation and solitude. He set out on his favorite horse, Kantaka, whose hooves were quieted by the gods, in the middle of the night so as not to wake his family as he departed.
Channa is the biggest buzzkill of Buddha.
What do you mean?
Well, because here's this prince has everything. He's the most talented man in the world. He can have any woman he wants. He's living a life of luxury. He's going out in his chariot. And then Channa's like, yeah, well, we'll all end up dying. Miserable and terrible. And, there's this guy in a ditch. Well, that's how we're all going to end up, die in a ditch.
I guess there's some truth in that. Yeah, he's the biggest buzzkill in all of history.
Because this guy was completely happy.
Mm-hmm.
As a very talented prince, until this Channa's like, no, we're all going to die miserable.
True. So Gautama was now 29, and he entered a forest, losing himself to the world, and avoiding the many temptations the gods sent to test him, including the daughters of Mara, the goddess of seduction. He fasted for long periods of time until he realized the need for food, and so he ate of a fig tree, then achieving Bodhi, or enlightenment. He now knew that desire was the root of all evil, and it sent people into cycles of death and birth forever. But the cycle could be broken if desire was suppressed, and one could reach nirvana. And so Gautama, now the supreme Buddha, returned to his people, and joined by his son, began preaching his philosophy for 45 years. So I think it is important to note that this is only one story of one of the Buddhas. One of the major principles in Buddhism is that, the supreme Buddha has been reincarnated many times, and this is the story of Gautama Buddha. And there's also, reincarnation for just about everybody else as well, until they do eventually reach nirvana and then break that cycle and go on, I think, to a higher plane. At least that's my understanding of Buddhism. That could be wrong, but as far as I understand it, that is kind of, how the reincarnation cycle works.
What are your thoughts about reincarnation?
I don't think it's. I mean, this is getting into theology more than mythology, but I don't think what?
So what?
I'm not saying that's an issue. I'm just saying we're moving away from mythology into theology. But I don't believe in reincarnation. I think we as humans are, our souls are special. They're more important, more I guess more human, more I don't know the quite the word I'm looking for, but they're in some way superior than the souls of animals. And I think to say that our soul goes into the body of an animal is almost denying, how important I think humans are. I think that's, not exactly the way that the soul works. Is that all you have to say about that?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, interesting perspective. You're a human bigot, so you think that all these other life beings have no value. So that's interesting to know.
That is not what I said. Animals definitely do have some value. I just don't think the value of an animal is equal to the value of a human. For a human soul to go into the body of an animal is almost a downgrade. But I guess that is...
You're a human chauvinist.
Yes, I sure am. But I guess that's almost kind of the point. If you don't lead a good, a morally example, like a good moral life, you do get reincarnated as a lesser being.
Right.
So I think that is part of it, recognizing that the human soul, the human body is in some way superior to the animals. But to be a human, again, you have to be a good human the first time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on reincarnation?
Yeah, I don't like the concept of coming back as a non-human. But I'm kind of I think it's interesting if you're going to get reincarnated as a human. But the problem is that, like say if you're being reincarnated because you didn't get the higher meaning of life, or a breakthrough in spirituality, I don't know how you can do a better job not knowing the bad job you did before. It would seem it doesn't. I mean, why would you get a do-over when it's a complete do-over, and it's like Groundhog Day? Why wouldn't you just do better in the one life that you had?
Yeah.
And then you either, kind of like Christianity, either the good side or the bad side of the ledger. Why would you wipe the whole thing out, including your knowledge of your own previous existence? For the most part, it just doesn't seem to be a point to it, unless you could somehow figure out, okay, what you've done before. Because, I mean, although it does in a way explain why some people are wealthy and successful, and some people are the beggars, because they must have been bad in a previous life. So it certainly would be helpful if I were the ruler of a country to say, well, I'm the ruler because I had 10 great lives and I'm a higher plane, dude. And so go back into the streets.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting.
What the Buddhism is about, but
I do think that, in some instances, the person does remember their past life. Like we do see that, I think, with Sumeda, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. He continues his spiritual journey. I think if you do reach, sort of the state of the Buddha, then if you do get reincarnated, then I think you do remember some of your past life, or maybe that's just this particular example with Sumeda. But it is interesting, reincarnating as a different human. I've seen, I don't necessarily buy into it, but it's an interesting idea. That's kind of a modern idea. Sort of, a fictional story, but also sort of maybe something that people sort of believe in, that, all humans since the beginning of time have had the same soul. Every time you die, you're reborn as somebody else. And it's just, an infinite amount of people and an infinite amount of lives that you live. and each time you're reborn as a different human since the beginning of humanity, essentially. And you'll continue to be a human until the end of time, just reincarnated in a different form. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I used to have a theory that there is only one human soul. It was Adam, not you, but Adam by Adam and Eve.
Yes,
not Adam Bishop. But that because when the soul leaves the body, it is not bound by time, and so Adam could die, and then his soul could be used to create Eve, back when Eve was created, and then he would die again as Eve, contemporaneously with Adam, and that same soul could be used going back in time for children and cousins and everybody through the entire history of the earth. It's one soul, and it's the same person just living out almost infinite lives.
Interesting. Yeah, I think
there's really no reason why it couldn't be that way.
I guess so. The sort of story or the sort of philosophy that I was talking about, also kind of says that, after you've lived all of the lives of a human, at the end of your death, at your individual death, you meet God, and he tells you you're going to be reincarnated as another human. But at the end of all of the human lives, then you become God, essentially, because you've known everything that there is to know about humanity, and then you move up. Now you are the God amongst infinite other gods. And then once you've lived the lives of every single one of those other gods, maybe then you go on to another higher plane of existence somehow. But it's interesting. I don't know. I don't know quite what your thoughts on that would be, or I don't know what my thoughts on that are. I don't necessarily think it's an accurate theology, an accurate philosophy, but it's definitely interesting.
It seems unnecessarily complex and repetitive, and in the reincarnation thing with Buddha. I mean, I know the Buddhas have some sort of concept of what the previous life was, but I don't. And I don't. I guess that'd be the feeling of deja vu or something. I don't know, but I mean, I don't think I have an advantage or disadvantage from my previous lives because I have no idea what happened.
Yeah.
So that seems kind of pointless to live another life if you don't have the knowledge of what you did wrong, as well as what you did right. I mean, how can you learn from that? How can you get to a better plane? Where are you starting out at? And to me, it just seems like a bunch of hogwash, and a bunch of wishful thinking, and I think it's very egocentric, as if I have lived many, many lives, and when people if you talk to anybody who believes in reincarnation, they almost never talk about how they were a frog. They talk about how they're Joan of Arc, or Galileo, or some other great person, because it's not fun to pretend that you were just a piece of dirt and that you murdered people or whatever, so they always seem to have fantasies of being a great person in a former life, as opposed to a despicable, horrible person that should have not been reincarnated, instead of should have just been snuffed out. Because it's egotistical, I think.
Yeah, I think we've had this exact discussion on the podcast before, when you were saying that like, I think you actually said exactly Joan of Arc as well. I think that was the example you used. So
yes, because the women who believe in reincarnation always want to be Joan of Arc.
Interesting.
I don't know why that is.
Well, we're now going
partly because they want to be men.
Okay.
I'm just joking. Because Joan of Arc was, like a military figure of sorts.
Yes.
And they want to be able to fight battles.
Yes. So
they were men.
Now we're moving on to the story of Sumedha. And it is possible for any man to take the form of a Buddha if he can find enlightenment. And while the great Buddha lived, a wise and wealthy man named Sumedha began to realize that all people went through a chain of death and rebirth, eventually falling into disease, old age, and poverty. He then moved to a hut in the Himalayas to attain enlightenment, and one day, the Buddha would be passing by his hut, and the people of the mountain had come together to make a path for his feet, and Sumedha eagerly joined them. As the Buddha approached, Sumedha laid himself in the mud and the rocks, and then realized that he could not that he could then cast aside all evil and enter nirvana. But the good Sumedha paused. How, he said to himself, how can I do this for myself? It would be better for all that I some day achieve complete omniscience and bring with me many people with the doctrines of Buddha. There appeared at his side Dipankara, the Buddha who was known as one who overcame. Dipankara knelt beside Sumedha and rejoiced in his choice. The trees around them blossomed and their lives at once became lush. The earth became rich under his body, more fecund and fertile. From the clouds the gods threw cascades of perfumed flowers. That was just a section from the book there. So Dipankara then told him that he had made the right choice, and Sumedha returned to the forest, essentially teaching all of the, practicing all of the conditions of a Buddha, perfection in alms, in keeping the precepts of renunciation, in goodwill, and in indifference, and he then died. He was reborn in countless forms, and in every one he followed his chosen path, and it has been said that there is not a particle of earth where the Buddha has not sacrificed his life for the sake of the creatures. So what do you think about this story? This is, I guess, kind of a story in which, the egoism of reincarnation is kind of defeated, I guess. He could at once go to nirvana, but then he realizes, but I could stay back, and I could help all these countless other people. So I guess is this, a story that directly contradicts your idea that, reincarnation is inherently egotistical?
No, it's very similar to televangelists. Because, look, I need this money so that I can spread the word of God.
Mm-hmm.
Great sacrifices, that I'm doing is I'm a chosen one to spread the message of the Lord. Granted, I have a huge mansion, private jet, and even my dog house has air conditioning. But it's just because I was chosen to go on this path to instruct you how to live a better life and go to heaven.
Yeah,
I mean that's why I view it.
I can see the relation there. Yeah, absolutely. We also didn't really.
I'm trying to be the most cynical I have been on this podcast.
I can tell it's really working out. We also didn't talk about kind of the other core principle of Buddhism. We talked about the reincarnation. But what is your thought on desire being essentially the root of all evil?
Well, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Mm-hmm.
I think, that's why I'm interested more in the philosophy than, the reincarnation, I think is a problem. But I think there's a lot of truth to that philosophy of, the desire to do things and that self-denial can lead to a higher path of understanding and consciousness. And I think there's certainly a lot of monasteries, the Catholic faith, over the centuries that a lot of religious thinkers of various faiths have the same type of concept of, even I think it was Socrates that was saying, that it's
all things in moderation.
Well, in the passions, the passions of youth kept him from being a more wise person. As he got older, he was able to think more clearly because he didn't have those passions as strongly as he did when he was a young man.
But yeah, I definitely think that there are some definite ties in sort of the part of desire that leads to evil compared to Christianity. I think, if you look at the main sins in Christianity as well, I think those are definitely sort of tied to desire. The lust and greed and sloth in a way, they're all very egotistical. They're all kind of rooted in what you want to do at one given time. You're not caring about anybody else. I think all of them are really rooted in the self. And I think that's really part of the teachings of Christianity as well, to die to the self as well in order to live a moral life. So I think there are definite similarities really in a lot of cultures and a lot of religions that relate to, desire being the root of a lot of evils.
Yes,
thank you for your comments on that. We'll now be moving on to the next story, which is that of the six-tusked elephant. The Jataka book outlines the 550 rebirths of the Buddha-elect Sumedha. And in one of these, he was born as a white elephant with 6 tusks in a small herd with his 2 wives. Let me try to pronounce these. Chulasubhadra and Mahasubhadra. Sheltering under a tree, Sumedha cast down a shower of leaves and flowers on Mahasubhadra, accidentally showering Chulasubhadra with dead leaves and ants, and later giving Mahasubhadra a blue lotus flower, and Chula Subada was clouded with jealousy. That night, she prayed that she would be reincarnated as a princess, so she could return as the queen of the king of Bewares, and her wish was then granted, becoming a queen, still holding her grudge against the elephant Sumeda. As she wept one evening, she asked the king for the 6 tusks of a white elephant, and so the king set out a hunter who clothed themselves in the yellow robes of a hermit, and he came upon the herd. Seeing the elephant, he shot a poisoned arrow straight through his head. Sumeda surely would have trampled this hunter, but seeing his yellow robes, he knelt and asked why this hermit had done this, and the hunter then confessed all. Sumeda remembered his wife and allowed the hunter to saw his tusks. This is a section from the book, an act in which the poor tired traveler seemed unable to commit. He sawed at the tusks, but with such ineffectual action that he caused the great elephant enormous pain and suffering, and filled his mouth with blood. And so it was that the great white elephant took the hunter's saw in his own hands and cut off his tusks himself. He presented them to the hunter, along with magic which would return him to the palace in 7 days and 7 hours. As the hunter left, the great elephant laid down and died. That evening he was buried on the pyre by the others in his herd. When the hunter returned with the tusks, the queen was filled with happiness as she clutched them, but soon an emptiness filled her, and despair soon crushed her heart, and she died, being reincarnated as the nun Savati. One day Savati traveled to cure Buddha, and she remembered that she had been married to him, and burst into tears. But Buddha smiled on her, and Savati went on to achieve sainthood. So what do you think the moral of this story is, with the desire for these tusks and this desire for revenge, only to be rewarded with emptiness?
Yeah, I don't know what to think about this one. I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, she I guess beware the bitches, I guess.
I don't know if that's exactly it.
That's not the lesson from Buddha in this one. I mean, it's similar to other myths and legends, and the jealous wife story. I don't know. I thought it was. I don't know. I don't know what I think about it. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's definitely another one of those, die to the self stories. I think we see that, with the elephant's wife. She really desperately wanted these things just for her own personal gain. She was just filled with revenge, but then when she got them, then she was filled with emptiness. But then also we see with Sumeda, cutting off his own tusks, that was also dying to the self. He was causing himself great pain, knowing that it would, I guess, teach his wife, the lessons behind this. He knew that there would be greater good in sawing off his own tusks. There'd be overall greater good, I guess.
I like your take on it better.
Yeah, I like to think, I'm not sure, but I think it might be closer to the actual moral than what your opinion was. Possibly, not sure.
Yeah, maybe.
And the last story in this section of the Legends of Buddha is that of Parinirvana. So now we're back with the Gautama Buddha that we started this section off with. And after 45 years of spreading his word, the great Buddha suffered a grave illness, and he knew that nirvana was approaching, which was called Parinirvana for the Great One. His illness was brought on by tainted pork given to him by the good smith Chunda, but Buddha felt no anger towards him, instead thanking him for bringing him the attainment of nirvana. Buddha made his pleasure known to all, so Chunda would not be blamed for this death, and soon Buddha's bed was surrounded by people of the highest order. Just before he was about to take his last breath, Buddha was approached by a hostile Brahmin who had not accepted his teachings, and Buddha raised himself one last time to answer the man's questions. And in the end there was silence, for the Brahmin had become a disciple, and Buddha was able to carry his teachings to the very end. I'm going to read for these last couple paragraphs from the book here. He said to those around him, "Now, my friends, I depart to nirvana, leading you with my ordinances. Do not weep. Seek the path to release, and you may all reach nirvana. Work on your salvation," he said quietly. And then he slipped into an unconsciousness which took from him his life. The body of Buddha was wrapped in the finest cloths and laid in state for 6 days, and it was burnt on a pyre in the coronation hall of the princes. The pyre ignited without match, for Buddha's body was ready for the final release for parinirvana, and it was consumed at once. He left behind his teachings and the goodness with which he had filled the world. So it's another interesting, more mythological story You have this, great figure who's, falling to this terrible illness. And in his final moments, he's, one last time, he's kind of accosted by this jerk who sees this poor old man on his deathbed and says, I don't agree with what you've been teaching, which is not a cool move. But, that's essentially what the Buddha wanted, I guess, was to keep spreading his teachings even into the final moments of his life. So it's an interesting tale. What's your take on this story?
Again, it reminds me of Socrates, where they're trying to convince him to escape, and he had to be true to his duty and his views and his life's philosophy, and refused to do so. And I thought this was a neat little story, this religious figure essentially gets poisoned accidentally, and was very forgiving and trying to be understanding to the guy that gave him the bad food.
Yeah.
And then knowing he's going to pass, he brings everybody together and tries to reassure them that to follow the teachings, and kind of a neat little story.
Mm-hmm. It reminded me very distinctly of the Station of the Cross, in which Jesus meets the weeping women, where they're crying for him, but he says, don't weep for me. Instead, work on your own sins, achieve, a better moral position, I guess. That's the parallel that I saw there. I think there's definitely a lot of similarities there. I think, really we do see a lot of interesting similarities just overall between Buddhism and Christianity. I think by and large, the moral teachings are very similar. Don't prioritize yourself above all other things. Don't give in to desire, I think, are definitely two major parts of the moral teachings. I think the actual, theology and, sort of metaphysics of the religions are where they really distinctly differ. And of course, there are differences in the moralities, but, I think they are very, very interestingly similar in a lot of ways, which is fascinating.
Yeah, and I confess I don't know enough about the Buddhist religion to really intelligently go into it. I mean, but there's similarities. And there's some similarities with certain varieties of Islam too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a tradition of denial and focus on being a good person and devout, and denying yourself those temptations and that type of thing. So I think there's it crosses religious philosophies as far as how to live a good life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Extent, depending on which variation you're. I mean, I'm not talking about the guys that want to fly planes into buildings, but, but that's hopefully still a minority.
Yes, I would assume so.
Distinct minority.
But yeah, it is interesting. I think it's somewhat. I mean, this is complete. I'm not making things up, but this is not backed up by any statistic I've found. But I think that Buddhism is very popular in the Western audience. If people are converting, away from Christianity and like away from the more, what they would like to call, organized religions, I think a lot of people do turn to Buddhism more than anything else. I'm not, of course, I don't have a source to back this up, but I think I've, seen that pretty regularly. Just this turning to, casting out desire, reincarnation is definitely a popular idea in Western society. A lot of people do like to put faith in reincarnation, so it's interesting.
Yeah, I think I don't know about the numbers, but because I think atheism is actually the biggest converter.
Yeah, I'm not saying Buddhism is the biggest converter, but I'm saying that if they are moving away from Christianity, Buddhism is popular.
Yeah, and I think what little I know about it, I think it's a useful philosophy to follow, to improve yourself and those around you, and how you view success and life. Certainly a lot of celebrities back in the day, I don't know if they still are, but it was a big deal back in like the 70s and 80s to study Buddhism. I know Richard Gere was a famous Buddhist, and I don't know if he's still, if you even know who Richard Gere is, but he's a big movie star in the 80s. And he became famously a Buddhist and that type of thing. So
well, I know the Beatles went on some trips to India throughout their lives. I know George Harrison in particular was very, interested in the sort of, Eastern teachings. He kind of combined a lot of different, ideologies as far as I know, which is very little. But, he took, parts of Hinduism, parts of Christianity, parts of Buddhism especially, to kind of, write his music and develop his own sort of interesting mix of faiths. If you listen to the song My Sweet Lord, he intermingles the chorus, or the background singers are intermingling, Hallelujah and Hare Krishna, among other Hindu chants. So it's interesting how popular it is to look into the Eastern religions from a Western perspective.
And I think it's really popular among people that have a lot of money and time.
Yes, that's true.
They could sit in a room for a couple of days and think about things and not have to, get up in the morning and go to work driving a truck.
Yeah, true, very true.
I mean, not that truck drivers can't be Buddhists, but I'm just saying, I think George Harrison, I don't know what he thinks. I don't want to. I think there's a fair number of people that like the buffet or cafeteria style religion. Where they say, "Oh, I like this from that one.
Yeah.
I like this from that one," and maybe that's the best way to go. I'm not a fan of religion by convenience. And I'm not saying this George Harrison. I'm sure whatever he views, he's dead now. Right?
Yes, he is. He's been dead for some years.
Well, maybe he's not dead. Maybe he's been reincarnated.
That's true. Maybe I am George Harrison. Who knows?
Well, he died after you were born.
Did he?
So can that still be? Yeah, I think so.
I thought he died before the year 2000.
How old are you? No, you think I thought he was more recent than that.
Let me look this up. I'd hate to spread misinformation on our podcast. Keep talking while I look this up.
Well, you want me to sing a tune?
That'd be great, actually.
No, they wouldn't. It'd be awful. But yeah, it's always something that I've wanted to study more and at least know about, but I just haven't gotten around to it.
2001 was when George Harrison died. November of 2001. I could be George Harrison.
Reincarnated.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Huh. So George, are you disappointed in your chosen path?
I don't remember any of my George Harrison thoughts, unfortunately. Maybe one day they'll come to me and I'll know.
Would this be a promotion? I think it would be a promotion.
Really?
Yeah, I do.
Well, thank you, I guess.
Yeah, I think you've earned an upgrade.
All right. Do you have any other closing remarks on the Legends of Buddha? Anything else you'd like to add before we wind the episode down here?
No, I think these stories were more illustrative of the beliefs of the followers of Buddha. I think, of course, I don't know all the details of the religion, but I thought it was I certainly enjoyed them more than the Hindu stuff, which I was there was like a trickster type element to some of the Hindu stories, and it seems like, I know there's one story about this the wife that got reincarnated into a bad thing to the six-tusked elephant, but it was ultimately a story of remorse and redemption, and I like those. I like those kind of morality tales where somebody who, if they did something wrong, then they repent, and then after repenting can be redeemed.
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for that, even though I am a cynic.
Yes.
What do you think?
I like these stories. They're pretty brief, pretty simple illustrations of what I assume are a much larger tradition. We could, of course, read the book with the detailing all 550 reincarnations of Sumedha. I'm sure that's a very interesting read. But they are neat little morality tales, and I definitely, out of sort of the morality tales that we've heard in this season of the podcast, these are definitely, I think, some of my favorites. Probably just stop being so desiring of other people's things or of things that you want. Just live your life and try to be a moral person. I think it's just an underlying good philosophy to have. Just stop caring about yourself more than everything else.
Now, don't go off to college and become a Buddhist. Then you're just like, that's just a caricature of a student at a liberal arts college.
Yeah, I don't plan on converting to Buddhism anytime soon.
Well, good.
Yes.
Cardinal Newman would would be upset.
He would be, unfortunately.
But he's dead.
He sure is.
His body's dead. Although maybe you're Cardinal Newman.
Maybe. Right. Well, this has been episode 21 of season 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
Or are you? Are you George Harrison? Are you Cardinal Newman? Who knows? Maybe one day you won't be Mark Bishop. You'll be somebody else entirely.
No, I'm the only one. I'm unique. I've never been before, and I'll never be again.
You are certainly unique.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
This line ends with me.